Welcome to the 902 podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain John Vik, and I want to thank you for listening. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO, with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 podcast. It's a day back in studio today, and we've got some very special guests other than the sheriff and Chief Deputy Houchin as usual.
Wow. Good afternoon, yeah.
Right. But Lancaster County Attorney Pat Condon and Chief Deputy Lancaster County Attorney Chris Turner are here today to join us. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. We appreciate you being here. We try to focus on, public safety issues that impact Lancaster County. You guys are certainly an important partner in that. So we'll get into all things Lancaster County Attorney's Office in just a second. But before we do that, we want to give our listeners at home just a little bit of insight into who you guys are and maybe how you got where you are. So, Pat, why don't we start with you? Where are you from, and kind of where'd you go to school and get into the law, so to speak?
So I'm from Northwest Iowa, a little town outside of Fort Dodge, Iowa. Born and raised on a farm. Still go back and farm in the fall. Try to get back for the corn harvest for about a week and do that. I went to Creighton University for 2 years, kind of during the height of the farm crisis, and so cost being a little more at Creighton.
1930s?
Yeah,
okay.
1940s. So, so let's say the early 80s is when I was at Creighton for undergrad, 2 years there. Then I went over to the University of Iowa, got the in-state tuition, finished there, and then came back to Creighton for law school, 85 to 88, and graduated in 88. Took the bar in 88, passed it, and was out in Grand Island. I started in the prosecutor's office out in Grand Island. I always thought when I was in law school I wanted to be in the courtroom, and figured this is a great way to do it, get in prosecution.
Was there something specific that drew you to being an attorney versus staying home on the farm in the first place? Or
I think with the farm crisis, my older brother was going to be is a farmer.
Okay.
He's on the farm right now, so I figured it wasn't going to be enough for the both of us. And my mom had a brother that was an attorney out in Arizona, and I listened to some of his stories when we were out there visiting, and thought, hey, this might be the way to go. So.
Awesome. Chris Turner, how about you? Where do you hail from? And
I hail from Northeast Lincoln. So Lincoln, born and raised.
Hometown kid.
Oh, you're a Rocket?
I'm a Rocket. Rockets to the top. So very proud Northeast Rocket. Graduated from Northeast 2001 and never left Lincoln. So went to Nebraska, got my criminal justice degree. Thought for sure I wanted to do something in the law enforcement area in college. And that was either going to be maybe a police officer or maybe try to go to law school and then do criminal prosecution. And so I did go the law school route, stayed here at Nebraska College of Law and got my law degree, and had a chance to work at the Attorney General's office for a period of time during law school, and then work in the Lancaster County Attorney's office as well for 2 years during law school, and was fortunate enough to never have to leave. Got a job right out of law school and have been here ever since.
That's awesome. I've not been to law school. I'm not an attorney, and I don't play one on TV. But I would imagine when you're in law school, you're surrounded by all sorts of other people in the same shoes, and there's a lot of different tracks that you can take, right? So was there something for you guys about prosecution that drew you that direction in general, or versus another type of law or private sector, things like that?
I mean, for me, it was the actual being in the courtroom. I knew that's what I wanted.
You could have done that as a defense attorney.
Defense attorney.
Yeah. Okay.
In private practice, malpractice insurance, things like that, and that's what I knew I wanted to do. And somebody said, well, prosecution, you can get in the courtroom. And I passed the bar in September, and I went out to Grand Island in the county attorney's office in Grand Island till 1990, and then I started in September, and by November I had my first jury trial. So I was getting in the courtroom like I wanted.
Right.
Okay. So do they have specific classes? So if you want to be a trial lawyer, they have specific classes for trial lawyers. If you want to be a tax lawyer, do they have specific classes for tax lawyers and contract or corporate lawyers? Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's developed even more since I've been out of law school, the specific tracks you can go down.
Okay.
And so, but when I was in law school, there was a litigation track, and then I always loaded up all my class schedules with things that were going to hopefully equip me to be a criminal prosecutor.
Okay.
Evidence, criminal prosecution, criminal procedures, so Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and then all the skills classes I could get my hands on. So actually, trial advocacy, appellate advocacy, criminal clinic, which is taught out of our office, where you actually get real hands-on. Yeah. You're prosecuting cases as a third-year law student under the supervision of an experienced attorney. And they keep developing more and more of those tracks, but all the other ones put me to sleep. This was 100% what I was going to do.
Okay. Well, so Chris, let's start with you then. I mean, you went directly to the Lancaster County Attorney's Office then from law school. So what positions have you held in the office up to where you're at today?
So in our office, we have a lot of specialties. And so we have 4 different divisions, and even within the criminal division, we have a number of subspecialties. But I started my career in juvenile. So I was working with families that were abusing, neglecting children and trying to ensure those children were safe. Mm-hmm. And then also doing some juvenile law violations, people that were habitually truant, so high school kids that weren't going to school, and did that for a few years. And then I got into the criminal side, which is really where I wanted to be, and did all sorts of things in that area. So I was a traffic prosecutor doing DUIs and traffic tickets, became a felony traffic prosecutor handling motor vehicle homicides. And
you and I crossed paths there for a brief time in our careers. Yeah,
we absolutely did when you were in the accident reconstruction team.
Yep. Yeah.
And so then they did sexual assault prosecutions, crimes against children for a period of time, drug prosecutions, working a lot with the sheriff's investigators, who are both doing active prosecutions as part of the task force, and then also interdiction type work.
Yep.
And then since then, I've been a chief, getting a chance to supervise different divisions within the office the last 7 years.
Awesome. Pat, how about you? What did it look like with your progression within the Lancaster County Attorney's Office itself?
Well, Lancaster County Attorney's Office, I started in 1990. I'd been out, like I said, I'd been out in Hall County. I was in the Hall County Attorney's Office. In law school, I actually clerked at the Douglas County Attorney's Office. So that's kind of always been where I've been. But when I got here, somewhat fortuitous, we had some out in Lancaster, out in Hall County, we had some drug cases, big sweep on drug cases, and some of our attorneys had left. So after about a year, I was getting into felony drug cases. So that worked out well. When I got here, again, we had some attorneys that left. We had a drug spot open, so I went into the drug spot. Mike Hevican, our Chief Justice, was who hired me. I was his last attorney hire. So I came in 1990 doing drug cases. At that time, we were doing some Title III, so I got used to I'd been involved in Title III. And then
what's Title III for listeners that don't know our business?
That's our wiretap.
Yeah,
that's a wiretap. So our narcotics were involved in that. So I got involved in some Title III, writing them and being involved with those. And then in September 22nd, my birthday of 1992, Candace Harms was abducted. And we were working on a series of robbery cases that we went up on a Title III on those, and that just happened to be Roger Borkland and Scott Barney. And we arrested them for the robberies, and then Scott Barney came forward on the whereabouts of Candace Harms' body, and the rest is history, as they say.
Right.
Yeah, I forgot that they were hooked up on drug charges prior to the
robbery. Yeah, they did the Goodyear robbery.
So one of our deputies' dad was the general manager of the Goodyear Federal Credit Union,
right?
And he was. They robbed him. Kind of an interesting tie in there.
Mm-hmm.
So you progressed then through the office and I guess previously worked in the position that Chris holds now. You were chief deputy.
So after the early 90s, I came out of the drug. I went into general felonies, which Chris has done, and then worked a lot of drug cases, a lot of general felony cases, a lot of homicide, things like that. And then in 2010, Gary Lacey, who I worked for 20 years, he retired, and then Joe Kelly became the county attorney, and he asked me to be his chief deputy. So I was Joe's chief deputy from 2011 to 2017. he gets appointed by President Trump to the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Nebraska, and I take over finish out his term 2017 to 2018, and then I ran in 2018.
Yeah.
Unopposed at that time, and then ran again in 2022 and was opposed, but won that. And 2026, we'll be running again. So
Okay. So what is that? I mean, that's people can kind of listen to the progression of that, but there's obviously more that goes into that as far as becoming an elected official. So what was it for you that kind of drew you to become Lancaster County Attorney? And you could, because you could. We'll talk about this in a minute. You still are in the courtroom, which I think is pretty cool as far as the elected official head of a county attorney's office to be in the courtroom. But you could have just stayed a felony prosecutor and done that. So what was it for you that kind of put the impetus to run?
I think just looking at things and seeing. We have a lot of good attorneys in that office. I mean, we've been blessed with the attorneys that we have been able to obtain and get into our office and work, and to be able to work with them to kind of direct them. Not necessarily direct them. I try to be as much hands off, but I mean, just to develop that talent, that we have, and then also to really make Lancaster County and Lincoln a safe place to live and a good place to live and work and to develop, the prosecution skills, but also, to develop things such as our problem-solving programs and our problem-solving courts that we have. I mean, that's, maybe getting a little ahead of ourselves, but, one of the big changes that I think we've seen throughout the years is, it used to be all about, we're going to put these people in prison for as long as we can, and now we're looking at, okay, is there a better way to perhaps do this, and maybe if we get people some treatment, we can avoid them going to prison and get them back out into the community where they're being productive citizens in our community and not taking up our tax money sitting in our prisons.
But there's another good thing with that, though, is, there's some accountability they have to do to go through those programs. It's not just, I sign up and this is an easy road, because some of those roads aren't very easy, and they have to mind their P's and Q's and jump through some hoops to get through that.
Absolutely. And that's kind of if I always tell people, if you haven't gone to a drug court graduation or a vets court graduation, you should go to one of those, because they kind of explain that process. And like you said, Ben, I mean, they're looking at 18 to 24 months testing, a lot of testing, a lot of programming, a lot of things that they're doing aside from living their own lives and working.
And sometimes they fall.
Absolutely.
And they've got it's a sliding scale, but they have to pay to be a participant in drug court, and probably the veteran treatment court as well. But
ownership.
Yeah, they have. So they've paid some money to be part of that. It's difficult. Pat and I have been to the last couple of drug court graduations, and it's an amazing story, and it's not easy. It's something, you'd like to think these folks would not be criminals, but for their drug addiction. And so maybe they won't steal, maybe they won't be a catalytic converter theft, or whatever the case may be, if they don't have that addiction. So that's the goal.
But the success rate of the ones who do graduate is pretty high.
Yeah, we have
85. Is that right? 85%, Beth?
About 85. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And so we've had great success there. And then one of the things we look at is, one of the things I looked at is, and Chris has been part of this too, with the juvenile. Chris has looked at how can we address this in the juvenile system, and make introduce programs and type of program, develop programs. I mean, we have nationally recognized programs that have been developed in the juvenile system in our office, and Chris has been a big part of that. Our problem-solving programs, our treatment program. I was just in a meeting before this today. How can we improve those things? How can we make those things better? And so that's what we're looking at. And again, it not only gets these people out into the community, but again, like I said, it saves taxpayers money.
Well, we touched on it, a little bit, but I do just want to highlight there's a lot of, positions and companies in Lincoln, Lancaster County where, the president of the company or the elected official is really moving into more of those meetings and administrative roles. But I think one of the cool things about your office is you two, although you're in administrative roles, are both still in the courtroom. How often does that get to happen?
Well, other agencies, I'm not sure. Now, for Pat and I both, it's a lot. Pat oftentimes has at least one or multiple homicide cases at a time.
Yeah.
And then I carry a pretty full felony docket of my own, and that keeps me pretty busy in the courtroom. And then Pat and I are also on the phones a lot of times every day and in the middle of the night, sometimes early in the morning, with death investigations and things that we become very involved in, especially on the front end, until that may be passed over into the hands of one of our general felony prosecutors.
Yeah, because our last podcast was about death and coroners, and it's kind of interesting. I don't think a lot of people in a lot of states do it the way we do it here, and who's the coroner and how it all works.
Right.
But I always wanted to, how many phone calls do you get? Because I know I've called you a few times throughout the years on that, and I can just imagine I'm not the only one doing that.
It's probably good you don't pay your cell phone bill by the minute anymore, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, there's quite a few. I think I might have missed one last night. I don't know if you got one last night.
I got one last night.
Okay.
So
I'm second on the list. So if Pat's not by his phone, then I'll get the phone call. But it's pretty consistent because there are those death investigations that your agency does a great job with, and so we get a fair number of phone calls every week with those. But then each of the other law enforcement agencies, if there's some issue that's come up, and every once in a while they need some legal input or legal advice about something, or maybe they need a search warrant reviewed or an arrest warrant processed quickly because of the community safety risk, and Pat or I or one of our other criminal attorneys has to be there to answer that call and make sure that those questions get answered.
That's a good segue to talk a little bit about just the why behind why we have a county attorney, what your office, what your role in the bigger picture of law and order in Lancaster County looks like. So I'll just throw it out there. How do you guys see the mission of the Lancaster County Attorney's Office, and what's the why behind what you guys do?
I mean, my thought is we're a part of the criminal justice system that works closely with the sheriff's department, the police department, the university police, the state patrol. We work with all these agencies, and we're all part of a team and trying to do what we can do to keep this community safe and make it a good place to raise your family, to have your kids go to school here, have the university here. And so we look at that and not only keep it safe, but how can we make it better? Mm-hmm. And I think that's key. I think, like I said, Chris has done a lot with our juvenile. How can we, keep these kids from even getting into the criminal justice system as an adult? Mm-hmm. And so we look at that, and it's really important, I think, and we are blessed with the agencies that we have in this jurisdiction. Everyone
Absolutely.
gets along together.
Yeah.
I mean, we get along very well. We coordinate our activities. It's amazing, and we are very lucky, and it makes our jobs as prosecutors, I think, considerably easier.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Captain John Vik with the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. When it comes to your career, don't settle for good enough. Don't settle for ordinary. We won't either. Be different, be better, be exceptional. Start your future today at joinlso.com. Has it always had the same roles and divisions as you guys have today, or does that look different, over the years as things have changed?
Generally, since the 34 years that I've been here, it's generally been somewhat similar. I mean, mm-hmm. we have our criminal division, our juvenile division, our civil division, our child support division. Some in Douglas County doesn't have a child support division, but so that structure has been the same. And I guess, with Mike, I didn't work much under Mike Hevican, but under Gary Lacey and Joe Kelly, I mean, I kind of took their approach, which was, you hire good people and you try to get out of their way because they can do the work.
Sure.
And that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I got Chris, and I got Chris Reed, my chief of my juvenile division, Dan Zig, chief of my civil division. I mean, you put good people in positions and it makes our jobs easier. and I don't try to micromanage. I'll answer the questions. The buck stops with me. I will take responsibility, but I think if you give those individuals that, it allows them to grow as attorneys and also grow into, our office has been a launching pad for many judges in this jurisdiction and others. So, I think that is something to be proud of.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how many Supreme Court justices have been Lancaster County attorneys people, and there've been a bunch. There've been a bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot in the district courts, a lot in the county courts here too, and in the juvenile courts.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, I don't think people realize you're our legal advice. As a county, you're at the county boards. We're the ones. If something occurs and one of it we get sued or any of that, you're the ones coming to our rescue. It's not just a criminal prosecution; it's all those other kind of
Well, and all the contracts that we enter into.
Yes.
And so multiply that by all of the agencies in the county with their contractual needs, and the county attorney's office prepares those contracts and make sure they're legal. And
Yeah, we basically have an in-house civil law firm that is within the county, and they're great attorneys that do a fantastic job. And like you said, they have a broad range of topics that they're dealing with every single day. And it's a contract dispute, it's writing a contract, it's representing the county in some sort of federal litigation.
Well, yeah, and our FOP negotiations and things, that you're part of that too. Right. So yeah, there's a lot of you're wearing a lot of different hats. It's kind of like with us. Everybody thinks we're just out in the cruisers making traffic stops and doing that, but there's a whole lot of different things that we end up having to do too.
I remember when I was new in the sheriff's office, Ron Leonards was county attorney back then, and having a homicide case, and got the suspect arrested. And Ron, he did the interview of the suspect.
Okay, yeah.
And that was pretty common back then, where the county attorney would actually come down and do the interview of the suspect.
Right. Yeah.
For people that are listening at home, and it can get confusing to, some of the terminology on, you're the county attorney, you're the prosecutor. Some places would call it a DA. How, for somebody that's, maybe they just watch Law and Order on TV and that's about the extent of their legal knowledge. Maybe count me in that group sometimes. maybe not. I don't know. But how would you describe your office's jurisdiction to somebody that's listening at home? Is it just the four corners of Lancaster County? Are there other roles and responsibilities that you have as you're technically the chief law enforcement officer in Lancaster County. So what does that mean to Pat Condon?
Well, generally, yes, it's going to be what's going on here in Lancaster County, and that's going to be that's what we're going to be looking at. But also we are involved in other organizations, our County Attorneys Association, that, and I think there is some expectation that the county attorney in Lancaster and Douglas and Sarpy are going to be kind of leaders of the County Attorneys Association for Nebraska. But no, like Paul Schaub is the president of our County Attorneys Association. He's from Cheyenne County. And that's what's really, and I'm sure the sheriff, I'm sure you all know, the difference between being in an urban and a rural district. And that's some of the things that we struggle with our problem-solving courts. How do we make a problem-solving courts that work well in an urban setting?
Yep.
But then you move them out to the rural setting, and then what do you do with them when you have a judge that's there once a week or once every 2 weeks, and you don't have the service providers that you have, and so that's what we're looking at is how can we, aside from keeping what we're doing here in Lancaster County and focusing on that, but also focusing on the rest of the state and making the process or making the system work for other areas of the state.
We talked about problem-solving courts a few times now, and that's certainly one of your priorities and focuses as an office. Are there any other focuses or things that they're just strategically important to the Lancaster County Attorney's Office right now as far as priorities? Yeah,
I think the problem-solving courts is definitely a high one that is done in conjunction with the district courts in Lancaster County. Our office, along with community corrections, is developing a number of problem-solving programs that are done completely within the purview of the county attorney's office to identify who should be eligible for those and what those programming requirements should look like to try to give people the best shot at dealing with whatever problems cause them to make the mistakes that they have, and then hopefully lower the chance of recidivism. But other things that we're always actively doing is trying to identify areas of improvement. And so a lot of times that's trying to identify ways to collect more information and determine which programs are the most successful and which aspects of those programs lead to the best success rates. Same thing with how we process our cases, how quickly we can ensure that adequate decisions are made on charging and communications with victims and the courts. And so that's just an ongoing process that we're always looking at improving.
Of late, there's been a big push, overcrowding, having to build prisons, having to add on to the jail and do those things. And there's been a push to let a lot of people out. How do you go about making those decisions at this with the forethought of also protecting the community? Because some of these people aren't in there just because they jaywalked.
Right, and I think that's one of the things, that we do. We keep in mind, but in the same sense, I don't think it's something that is the predominant focus of our job. If that's where they are, that's where they are, and we'll take them there. But I mean, I think we need to be the victim, and prosecuting these individuals need to be our number one goal, and that all goes to keeping this community safe. And I think that's what we need to look at. I think, the thing that people have to understand is this is a growing community. So there's going to be more people that are coming into the community. Unfortunately, more people that are going to be committing crimes. So it's part of growth. And the problem-solving programs, the problem-solving courts, the things that we're doing to try to deviate or to direct them elsewhere besides the penitentiary, that's something. But that's always, always something we're looking at. But again, I don't think we need to be aware of it, but not be the driving focus of what we're doing.
Yeah, because we run our fugitive task force out of our office here with the Marshal Service and things, and talking to those guys that are doing that, they put somebody, arrest them on a warrant, put them in jail. 2 weeks later, they're out looking for the same individual again, but this time they've done another crime with another victim, a part of it, and we do what we do and our job part of it, but at some points it gets frustrating, and also, these individuals begin to figure out, I don't have anything else to lose, and that's when it gets dangerous for us.
Or they think they're never going to be held accountable for their actions.
And that's sometimes the juveniles.
Yeah, and that's I think what's happened with juveniles, and that's why we're getting younger juveniles committing more violent crimes, because when they do some petty crime, they're not being held accountable. And so they think they can skate, and until they can.
Yeah. I mean, Chris, do you want to just talk a little bit about our juvenile, some of the success we've had in our juvenile programs? And
yeah, sure. A lot of that is trying to look at the data to see, again, which programs are successful, which kids are the most likely to recidivate and have issues and come back. And there's certainly, we use some tools to help do that, some screening tools that are implemented with our diversion offices. And they're really, through studies we've done over the last 5 years over how we operate our juvenile division, we've learned a lot about how well that tool really works, and it does work pretty well to determine some low-level offenders who have low risk that don't need a juvenile court intervention. They don't need to be in front of a judge. The meeting that deputy is enough of a deterrent for them, and then maybe the consequence that mom or dad has done at home is going to be enough. But then certainly there's instances where that's not going to be enough, and we have to try to match whatever dosage of intervention we think is the appropriate level to try to correct that. And maybe that's going to be a diversion program for a juvenile. We have a number of those. Or maybe it's going to be going in front of a juvenile court judge and trying to have that youth placed on probation to have some sort of rehabilitation programming that they're going to have to follow with a lot of supervision and a lot of oversight from the court system and from the juvenile probation office.
Well, Pat, you touched on it a little bit ago about hiring good people and getting out of their way. So I want to move to talk about the people that make up your office, because it's not just you two. You got a whole team of people rowing the boat behind you. So how many people do work at the Lancaster County Attorney's Office? And beyond attorneys, what other positions do you guys have? So
we have about 82 right now in our office, attorneys and staff. Okay. We have 40 with me. We have 40 attorneys. And they go the range from attorneys like me that have 34 years to attorneys that have 6 months.
Okay.
So we go the whole range there, and then we have our staff people. We have paralegals. We have legal secretaries. We have our front desk people that greet people when they come in and try to figure out what services they need and try to help them out.
Did I see recently you guys have some victim advocates or some victim services positions? Did I see that?
We are you are in, man, you get your information quickly.
I try.
We are just beginning kind of the process of considering having some sort of victim liaison or victim advocate position. Okay. So we're just beginning the talks of that to see if that's something we can incorporate into our office.
Okay.
Not something we have yet, though.
Awesome.
Us in law enforcement, it's no shocker that we've been having some difficulties finding people to want to be law enforcement officers and doing that. How is it going for you guys when you have openings and hiring? Have you seen anything different in the last several years?
Yeah, I would say the ability to attract great quality candidates is still there, and we have a lot of success with that. We're able to hire great people, and we're fortunate. I know a number of other prosecutors' offices in other parts of the state where they are, they're down 2 attorneys, 3 attorneys, and these are offices of 5 or 6. So they're half full, and we don't have that issue. But certainly it is getting harder and harder to sometimes retain those people that, you work with them and they're equipped and they're equipped to do a great job, and they're doing a great job for us. And other agencies see that, whether that's federal prosecutors' offices, and sometimes it's the judgeships that come calling, or other state agencies, and then trying to be competitive with them. As a county agency, there's some reality that goes into that.
Oh yeah, you can only pay so much,
right? And I know that's something law enforcement has too. Sometimes you equip people, and they're excellent people, and then the federal agency comes calling, and they start taking some of the people you've really built up into amazing investigators. And then you got to, train the next person.
Well, you mentioned
you've lost about 6 deputies over the last 10 years to federal agencies. So.
Yeah, and it does stink, but it is kind of feather in your hat that you're able to give them that ability and that they can move on. And I've always been happy for folks that
when they can better themselves, and that we've had a hand in helping them better themselves. That's pretty gratifying.
Yes.
You mentioned the university partnership. I'm sure it's helpful having a law school in the town where your office is located. That's probably a pretty good source of applicants for you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing there is the clinic.
UNL
is one of the few prosecution clinics in the country.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they get to come in and see what we do. And it doesn't only help us. I mean, it helps prosecutors throughout the state. I mean,
sure.
Steve Schmidt was headed that for a number of years now. Jessica Murphy's going to be taking over for him. But Steve has prosecutors that he has taught all across the United States.
Yeah.
And that really is helpful to us. I'm really appreciative of Dean Mobley and the UNL Law School and having that program. Because it helps us, but it helps prosecutors, like I said, across the United States.
Yeah, Steve just retired, and we went to his retirement, and they had the pictures up, and a lot of the students came back and just said so many high praises of him and your guys' office and just what they have learned and been able to do with that program.
Yeah, we sent out an email asking just for feedback for folks that might be interested in wishing Steve well as he was retiring. And I think we got 70-some letters from former students that just really appreciated the experience they had working with Steve, working in the office, and getting a chance to actually be a lawyer during law school. And I'm imagining it's maybe like the law enforcement academy where you're certainly learning a lot while you're in the classroom, but then it's a different it's a different experience when you're actually out in the field doing the work.
Yeah, you got to apply what you've learned.
Well, that, and at least they get a chance before they're really out on their own and go, is this really what I want to do? And you get a taste of it and find out what the real world is like.
Yeah. And I would say, as I read some of those responses from people, it was people that had maybe they were misconceptions about law enforcement and misconceptions about prosecution, and they had ideas in their head of what it was going to look like and how the process was going to work. Maybe it's going to be really slanted against fairness. And those people wrote back and said, I learned so much, and I did learn how it's imposed fairly. I did learn how it's done ethically and the importance of doing it ethically. And even though they didn't choose prosecution as a career, they went into other fields. I think they definitely have an appreciation now for the job that law enforcement does and prosecution offices do.
Well, let's speak to the aspiring attorneys that are out there, or maybe some who are already attorneys, but we do still need the best and the brightest in Lancaster County. So if people want to find job opportunities at the Lancaster County Attorney's Office, lancaster.ne.gov, and go to the county attorney's page, or where can they find more information about your office and career opportunities?
I would say following us on LinkedIn is probably the best.
Okay.
We immediately always post any job openings there, and we'll let people know. And that's true whether they're maybe law clerk positions or internship positions or paralegal positions,
Awesome.
as well as attorney positions. That's the best place to get started and get your foot in the door. And even those instances where we don't have an opening right now, it's always nice to let people contact us, and we'll kind of keep their information on hand in case an opening comes up in the future and we can reach out.
So there's kind of a two-way communication on LinkedIn if people have questions or looking at opportunities down the road.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Do you guys have any openings now, or are you guys career full?
We are fully staffed. I'm going to knock on wood here.
Wow.
So, our
Good for
40th
you guys. Wow.
Our 40th attorney is right now studying for the bar exam, and so he'll take the bar at the end of July and then start with us in August.
So what does the training look like? Obviously, you go to college, you go to law school, and then does it stop? Or what does training look like for a prosecutor at the Lancaster County Attorney's Office?
It doesn't stop.
Doesn't stop.
We kind of laugh at it because prosecutors, for whatever reason, have 21 hours of CLEs every year.
Okay. It's like continuing ed kind of stuff.
Continuing legal education.
Okay.
An attorney outside our office has 10 hours.
Oh, okay.
So there's more for county attorneys, but we do. I mean, there's also we've developed some good in-house training that we put on.
We rely on all you. So
Yes.
you've sent your investigators, Investigator Loos and Analyst Wendell came up and did some nice training
To
for
be
us.
fair, I think we borrow both ways.
Yeah,
I
we
think
do.
You guys have helped us out too. So
But we have 40 hours of mandatory continuing education, so don't lie to me about 20.
So, but no, we tried to do that, and then we also, with our bigger felony cases, we try to get the attorneys, the younger attorneys, kind of teamed up with an attorney that's been there a little bit longer handling those cases. So we try to make sure we have two attorneys on most cases, so they can kind of see how things are done, kind of learn from the experienced attorneys.
how many cases
Two
does
heads are better than one.
Yeah, there you go.
That's right.
how many cases does a typical attorney carry?
Ooh, it's very different depending on which assignment they're in.
Okay.
So if you think about the more serious the type of offense and the more involved that investigation is going to
Less
be, the
cases.
more involved and the prosecution is going to be, the less cases. But
Okay.
our major felony attorneys who are handling first-degree murder, second-degree murder, manslaughter, robbery, major serious crimes, each of those right now have between 100 and 120 open felony prosecutions.
But some of those could be years old. I mean, I suppose by the time they're,
But there are time limitations on those when you got to prosecute, right?
Yeah, there's always a speedy trial clock
Right.
is always running. And so, some of those are different, all different stages.
Yeah.
Some of them maybe just opened up this month and some of them maybe a year and they're getting towards the end of their life as far as when they're going to close. But a drug prosecutor in our office, and we have 3 of those, each of those attorneys have 400 to 500 open felony cases.
wow.
Traffic attorney has 400 to 500 open cases.
Okay.
Sexual assault attorneys, probably around 60 to 80. Because those are usually the most involved, time intensive.
More complex. Yeah.
As far as rapport building with victims and meeting with witnesses routinely.
Wow.
And so we try to balance that out the best that we can. And it's, dependent on the type of work that they're doing.
Hey, some of the people come in and they talk and says, well, why didn't they prosecute? Why are they letting them go on that? Why aren't they charging? What are some of the things you have to do as a prosecutor that you need to make sure that to move forward and to charge somebody and take them to trial and go through the whole process?
Because if we arrest them, we think they're guilty.
I know. We know that.
Well, and as you know, there's the probable cause to arrest.
Yeah, I
and
know.
beyond a reasonable doubt to convict. So, and that's what we look at, and I think that's what all prosecutors look at, and that is, do we have enough to prove to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt the elements of the crime that we're charging them with?
Yeah.
And that's that's something that we. And again, that's why it's so important to have the relationship that we do with the agencies, because if there's something that we think hey, we really need, can you see if you can shore this up? Here's an issue where, we think we need more evidence of this. And I think if we didn't have that relationship, people could get their feelings hurt. And we're all big people here. We can if I think there needs to be something more, I'm going to tell you there needs to be something more. You may disagree with it, and that's fine. But we're gonna work together and try to make that case the best case that we can.
Well, I'm glad you said what you said about, because people don't understand that it's a lesser standard for us to arrest than it is for you to convict.
Right.
And so, we may arrest somebody because we have probable cause to do so. We may stop them because we have reasonable suspicion, which is a lower standard yet, and then develop probable cause to arrest. And then we have to make sure that you have the evidence you need to convict beyond a reasonable doubt.
That was the one thing when I was in charge of the criminal investigation as the captain. We didn't work on probable cause because they're just going to walk out the door. Our whole goal was trying to meet what you guys needed to make that arrest. Now, sometimes for the protection of the citizens, we may not quite be there yet, but we think we'll be able to, and we'll make an arrest just so that the citizens are safe and work on it from there. But yeah, that's always been one of the biggest goals on us, because it does us no good if it's just PC, because it's not going to go anywhere. And sometimes that emboldens people to think, well, see, I beat it and got away with it. So,
and I would say as a prosecutor too, one of the hardest decisions you ever have to make is that decision to say, I think this person did it, but I don't think I can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly.
that would be hard.
And it's hard. It's hard to sit with victims, especially on some of the bigger cases, sexual assaults.
Yeah.
Someone where their loved one's been seriously hurt, maybe even killed. And it's our belief that there's not evidence to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, or maybe there's an applicable defense that applies that we don't have evidence to overcome. But that, again, ethically, that's our responsibility. And those are difficult decisions. But those are decisions that Pat tells us, and ensures that we're making and we're following the law and that we're doing it in an ethical manner. And that's bigger than maybe the one case where, gosh, man, we really don't want this person to get away with it.
So speaking of that duty, responsibility that you guys have, why do you think it's important that we have, an independent investigative and then a prosecutory body? I mean, that's kind of, I guess, what our forefathers wanted when they set up the system. But big picture wise, why do you guys feel that's important to have an independent set of eyes on that?
I think it's important to make sure that we as the county attorney aren't directing who's arrested, that we're never telling law enforcement that person needs to be arrested or that investigation needs to happen. That's within the purview of law enforcement. You'll make decisions about arrest, and we'll make decisions about prosecution, and there's some checks and balances that go in between those things. And hopefully when we communicate really well, like we do in this jurisdiction, we can make sure that at least each part of the system knows what the other one is doing and why. And that helps better outcomes in the end. But having that independent ability to make decisions independent of the other agency, I think is really important.
Yeah, giving you guys heads up of, hey, this is what we're doing, what's going on, and get your eyes on it. But yeah, the good thing is, you're right. I've always, taught the investigators things. Don't call up there and ask them if you should arrest. We need to make that decision on our end of it and go from there. So,
and that starts oftentimes like especially in the biggest cases, you're making those calls to Pat as soon as you're learning of the event,
right?
And sometimes it's Pat or I that are going out to that crime scene, and that's valuable for us to have that immediate notification, and so we can start beginning our own review and our own anticipation of what the investigation may unfold and how we're going to end up trying to prove those things.
So let's talk about what that looks like. If whether you have advance notice of something going on or not, you get something in the form of a complaint. I think is the official legal term, but it would be a ticket, or if somebody gets lodged in jail. What happens from there? And sometimes it does take a long time. So for families or victims that are thinking, "Gosh, this is taking a long time," what happens? Once we hand a ticket off to the prosecutor, just briefly, kind of what steps go into place from there?
Well, I mean, there's there can be a time frame for each portion, and what I mean by that is, a sexual assault case may get investigated for a number of months before there's an arrest. So, and once there's arrest, then we take over and we do what we do. So that there can be time there, and we realize that, and again, it's talking with the investigating agencies, so they know, we kind of at least get a little heads up of what's going on, what's going to be coming up, so we can look at that and look at that and then be ready to act on that when the ticket gets up to our office. It could be somebody is arrested driving under the influence, or they have a taillight out and they have meth in their car. They're going to get arrested that night, and then probably by the following day, we're going to have them cited, or we're going to have them charged, and they're going to go to court at 2. We're going to have charges, and they're going to be charged immediately. Yep. So there's just certain types of events that are going to lead to a more, as soon as you guys hand them the ticket, we're going to be probably charging them.
Yep.
Or it's going to be a little bit of a wait while we look at the crime, make sure, again, that we can get the evidence to charge the individual to make a case.
And then, we go through the court process, hopefully in a conviction, unless you can come up with some other problem-solving court type of solution in between. But does your job stop then at conviction, or do you guys have additional things with appeals and things that go on down the road from there?
I would say on felony cases, once the conviction happens and the sentence has been imposed, if there is going to be an appeal of something that happens, the Nebraska Attorney General's office under our state system is going to handle that appeal.
Okay.
And so there certainly is communication between our office and the Attorney General's office to prepare them to say, here's your victim, contact information, probably let the victim know this is who's going to be handling it with the Attorney General's office. And then there can be later appellate steps that someone might file if they're remain incarcerated, and then our office does handle those. Those are called post-conviction appeals. Okay. Those are typically inmates filing litigation on their own without the assistance of an attorney.
Gotcha.
And then we handle those.
Gotcha. Special types of cases. We touched on coroner investigations a little bit. You guys get some midnight calls about that, and that can be anything from a hospice death. Well, probably not a hospice death, but maybe an unattended death, on up to some sort of accident, suicide, even homicide. One thing we didn't talk about yet was grand jury cases for in custody stuff. So, what does that look like from your perspective as the county attorney? What role does a grand jury play in your world?
Well, I mean, it's one of the few roles that perhaps not a lot of attorneys in the county attorney's office get to see. I mean, we generally have certain attorneys that handle our grand juries, and this, the overall secretive nature of the grand jury is the reason why we kind of keep it closed up a little bit. But the number of cases that we have in grand juries, I think would probably surprise people, because if there's a death at the penitentiary, even though it's an expected death, somebody has cancer, we still have to do a grand jury on it. And
since they're in custody.
Yeah, they're in custody, so we're going to do a grand jury. So we have a lot of those cases where, we're handling those in custody deaths. Generally, we get through those cases pretty quick. But then you do have your law enforcement, and your law enforcement involved shootings, officer-involved shooting cases that, those take a long time. I mean, those take time to process and again, to get it done correctly and to present that to the grand jury. And really, we are there for the grand jury. The grand jury kind of has the investigation. They can ask to call witnesses. They can ask for us to bring in more witnesses or bring in more evidence. We're just presenting to them what we have, and then if they want more, we'll go get them more.
Yeah, and I suppose that's yet another reason for the separation in powers and the checks and balances a little bit, because our offices do work closely together, but there are some times when you guys have to make an independent analysis of whether something we did followed the law, and so it's a tight balance there to be able to navigate that sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the good thing is we both respect each other's positions and understand that we each have those responsibilities. And that allows that to happen.
Now, are there any other cases other than in custody deaths that the grand jury can listen to? Can you bring different things to them to have them look at?
Well, I mean, technically, we could bring any case to a grand jury. I mean, that's. But we also, we have the ability to charge.
Correct.
the way we charge on affidavits and the information by filing complaints. But you could try take any case to a grand jury. But it's generally going to be your officer-involved shootings or your in-custody deaths that are going to be that we're going to have at the grand jury. There is, if you remember, there was a special prosecutor appointed a number of years ago when a football player was involved in an incident. And,
Correct.
And that went to a grand jury, and Omaha had one a few years back that went to a grand jury with a special prosecutor. So there are other ways to get to a grand jury, but generally it's going to be the in-custody deaths.
Especially here in Nebraska. Now, other states do it differently. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, other states have grand juries continually, much like the federal system.
Yes.
Well, what would you say is new at the Lancaster County Attorney's Office, and any big projects or
Oh, they got to talk about their new place. My gosh.
Well, I was going to say our new our new location,
New digs.
new digs. Since for about the last 2 years, we've been now, and some people probably think this is rather apropos that the prosecutors are in the jail. It's the old jail.
not the jail anymore?
Not the jail anymore, but we were in the old jail building. We're in the 605 building. We were on 4th floor. We outgrew that, and we moved down to that location where we are now. Now going on for 2 years. You still have to come in through the main security. So it is a secured floor, so you have to come in through the main entry to the courthouse. The county board. We're really thankful for the county board and the taxpayers of Lancaster County for providing us that area to work in. It's very conducive to doing the work that we do.
And is that allowing you to have all your staff under one roof now? Before you had a satellite spot for some positions.
Right. We had our child support division at one point in time was even down at Traybert Hall, and we moved them over here. They were over here for a few years before we finally got to second floor. Now the entire office is on that second floor of the 605 building, and that's very nice. And we have a little room to grow, so hopefully we won't be outgrowing that for a while. But it's a good location.
Chris, we talked about some of the victim services and advocacy stuff that you're looking at. Any other new projects that you guys are working on?
Yeah, I said we're trying to develop a dashboard that's going to be both public facing for some information on what the office is doing as far as there are cases and the number of cases that we have filed. And it's, in a given year, we might file 6,000, 7,000 cases.
Wow.
And that's not even including the traffic citations.
Okay.
And so that's been in the works and something that we're working to develop. And then there'll also be an internal component that allows us just to manage and staff better and organize the staff better and ensure that they have all their things that they need in order to do their jobs well.
Well, just to kind of bring it back full circle to the public safety picture, we talked about 100 things that you guys do today, but at the end of the day, how do you feel that the Lancaster County Attorney's Office makes Lancaster County that safer place to live, work, and play like you talked?
I think it goes directly to the people in that office, the attorneys that we have in that office, their dedication to doing that. And hopefully that's something that Chris and I have, as the leaders in the office, project that to them. It's important to us that that's there, that people feel safe, that people feel that they can, if they have an issue, they can call us. They know that we're going to talk to victims. We're going to make them as aware as possible of what's going on in a case, and that their case, no matter how big or how small it is, it's important to us. And we are going to do everything that we can to hold individuals accountable for what they do when they violate our laws.
Yeah.
I would echo just what Pat said and said we're going to do it to the highest degree possible with the highest amount of ethics possible. And those ethical standards are incredibly important to Pat and to me and to everyone in our office. And so we'll keep ensuring that we're meeting that expectation.
The one thing I'm just so thankful too is not all jurisdictions do the prosecutors and the law enforcement get along.
Well, that's absolutely true, and we're extremely lucky. So thank you to everybody in the sheriff's office and the other agencies we get to work with. Because I go to national conferences, and we talk about how our agencies, as far as the prosecutors' agencies, get to deal with our sheriffs and our local police department, and they just look at me awestruck about how lucky we are. And we realize that.
Yeah, well, and so do we. Because there's nothing worse, and I don't think it's anything worse for the citizens is when the county attorney's office and the local law enforcement are butting heads, and that nothing good is going to come from that, and it makes the community less safe. So I really appreciate you guys on that and the open relationship. And like we've always said, we don't always agree, but we always have the communication going, and everybody's professional and it's not personal, and we do what we do and you guys do what you do on that. But I think for the most part, we see eye to eye on probably 90 to 95% of everything.
Well, I think ultimately it serves the people better, when you have agencies that can work together, and we're certainly proud to be able to partner with you guys the way that we do, and that's why we wanted to have you on today. So we really appreciate you taking the time. We know you guys have busy schedules, but nice to hear your perspective of the criminal justice system in Lancaster County. We just want to thank you guys for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting us in, and thank you guys again for all that the sheriff's office does for this community. I mean, you guys, we're like Chris said, and I echo that. We're blessed to have this agency here and being able to work with them.
Awesome. Well, Pat Condon, Chris Turner, Lancaster County Attorney's Office. Appreciate you guys coming.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, guys.
Thank you.
That is all the time that we have for today's episode of the 902 podcast. We appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts so you can catch all of the episodes of the 902 podcast as they're released, or go back and listen to some of our old ones. Be sure to check us out on social media. The Lancaster County Sheriff's Office is at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, TikTok, and we're also now on LinkedIn, so be sure to check us out on there. If you have questions about career opportunities at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, you can find us at www.joinlso.com. And lastly, if you have a question that you'd like to submit via email, you can reach out to us, lso@lancaster.ne.gov. Thanks for listening.